we got to talk about this Alex DeBrincat move to the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell the Chicago Blackhawks are doing. Let me just run through this real quick. So there were some people last year who thought that they were actually really good because they trade for Marc-Andre Fleury. They trade for Seth Jones and sign him to that monster contract, which looks terrible right now. And people thought they were actually good. Then they start the season. They're an absolute train wreck. And now they're blowing up the roster. And they're actually trading away quality young players like Alex DeBrincat, who is a 2-time 40-goal scorer. Also, Lepore, did you know only 7 players in the NHL have scored more goals than DeBrincat since he entered the league as a rookie in 2017, nice. 2018. Only 7 players in the league have scored more goals during that span. And the Blackhawks figured, we don't need a 24-year-old young stud 40-goal scorer. No, not at all. We don't need that. Let's tear it down and leave Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane on the roster.
Yeah, ouch. Yeah.
It's just kind of a bizarre situation. So they trade DeBrincat to the Senators for the 7th overall pick, 39th pick, and a 3rd rounder in 2024. I think it's a great move for Ottawa because right now that Ottawa Senators team, they're looking pretty scary, especially up front in that top 6. But I just had to get that off my chest. I just think the Blackhawks are insane. Like even just to rewind quickly to go over some of those moves. So they traded Adam Bokvist, who they selected 8th overall, and 2 first round picks and a 2nd round pick to the Blue Jackets in that Seth Jones deal. So it's like they drafted that defenseman Bokvist, 8th overall, trade him for Seth Jones, who now looks like just looks like a disaster of a contract. So now they're left with essentially Kane, Taves, and Seth Jones, and Peter Mrazek and net. It's a mess.
Yeah. It kind of like an unpopular opinion, I think, on this one, because everyone was shitting on the Blackhawks. And I'm not going to say like I think what they did was awesome, but I do look at the deal for DeBrincat, and I kind of ask myself, okay, well, what if the kid's not going to sign? And I think the issue here is that, okay, he's not going to sign. This team's going to be bad for a while. So it's almost like this guy's kind of useless on our team right now. And there's also the matter of clearly with getting rid of getting rid of Bedard, with getting rid of DeBrincat, getting rid of Doc, acquiring Mrazek, this team is going full-blown balls to the wall Connor Bedard sweepstakes. So having Doc and having DeBrincat makes you almost too good to be at the very bottom. And as stupid as that sounds, that's the league we play in right now. So to get the 7th overall pick, I mean, the 7th overall pick is a lot. But what I would love to see, absolutely love to see, is, or be on the fly on the wall, or to have been a fly on the wall for, would have been the discussions with the teams above Ottawa. Because my assumption is that Chicago went through every team. Montreal, will you trade 1st overall for DeBrincat? Then you go to 2, 3, 4, Seattle, and keep going. And I'd love to know the choices of those teams or how they evaluated it. Like Montreal, would you have been shocked if they traded 1st overall for DeBrincat?
I would have been pretty shocked, to be honest.
You're saying the pick's more powerful.
Yeah, I would have taken the 1st overall pick. I think that's
me
too much to give up.
Yeah, me too. But I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't have called Montreal crazy for like
no.
Yeah, for a guy who scores 40 goals.
Yeah, you'd be able to justify it. You could figure out ways to justify that.
Yeah, and then to show your fans immediately, we have Caulfield, Suzuki, and DeBrincat. That's nice. So again, I find it interesting. I just think for them, it's a cap league. Like I don't want to say it doesn't really matter what you get in return. It's just you have to strategize based on cap availability. Are guys going to re-sign? What can you get in return? They're going to trade more bodies and get more picks. Like they're going to be bad for a while, and they know it. And they should the best they can. Actually, a trade I thought of when it happened was the Kessel deal. Leafs to Pittsburgh. We got Kapanen, who was like a mid-first rounder. And it was the late 1st rounder that they flipped for Anderson. So at the end of the day, you got a mid and a late 1st rounder for a guy who scored 35 goals, 80 points. So, and he was signed. He was signed.
But Phil Kessel was not a 24-year-old at the time.
Absolutely. But I'm saying in the way of like, you have a guy confirmed in his career, he will put up these numbers. And we got two first, 1 mid, 1 late. So DeBrincat's not signed. He's got 1 year to go, and his qualifying offer is $9 million. And I'm not trying to fully justify it. Like, I wouldn't have made the deal if I was Chicago, like hockey wise. I'm just saying, I think people sometimes we revert back to like pre-cap and what like certain returns were. Like, no one, for example, like Ottawa, had they gone to Ottawa and been like, we want Stützle, Ottawa would have been like, no. Because then, like, what's the point? If we remove Stützle and we bring in DeBrincat, what's the point? Or had they been like, we want whatever bought, no, they would have said no. Like, we don't want to give something on our roster. So like, what are you going to give up? You're going to give away that pick. And that's it. So I don't know. Like, I just don't think it's as bad of a deal as people are making it out to be. Because again, the 7th overall pick is a high pick, and you don't see picks that high get traded too often. But I think it's clear what Chicago is doing. So it doesn't, the things in between almost don't really matter, because these guys are good quickly too. Now, this kid is 7th overall in 3 years, might be in the lineup and be a very good player. Like, based on statistics, he most likely will not be, but I think people know where I'm going with this. Judge the Chicago Blackhawks in 4 to 5 years on these moves, because they're going to stockpile picks, get rid of salary, and off they go. And then they're hoping to God they land on Connor Bedard. I'll put it this way. If they land on Connor Bedard, everything they did was right.
Yeah. No, you honestly made a really good case there, Lepore. I thought that was a really good take. This team is clearly in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, and they did get the 7th overall pick, which, you would think would be a really good prospect. Now, a lot of the times from picks 5 to 10, not all of those guys become, star players in the NHL.
It's tough at that number. Yeah.
It's tough. And you know what? Even sometimes from 1 to 5, right? Like, no one's a sure thing, honestly, when it comes to being a star player who's going to make, first or second team all-star and make all these all-star games. Like, you're not guaranteed anything picking in the top 10, but it's clear what the Blackhawks are doing. And who knows, maybe they just didn't want to commit, because I feel like Alex DeBrincat would have been a lock to sign like an 8-year deal for $8 million per.
At least. Oh yeah.
Right. It would have been 8 by 8 times 8.5, just based on how great of a goal scorer he is. And maybe Chicago figured, why are we going to do this if we're going to be bad anyway? So you know what? Kind of convinced me a little bit, Lepore, that maybe the Blackhawks.
Oh, there you go. I'm very
aren't
convincing.
As crazy as people think they are. I still think it was a bad trade, because I think if you're going to rebuild around somebody, you rebuild around a 24-year-old who's one of the top 10 goal scorers in the NHL, period. Like, just don't overthink that.
Well, I'll put it this way. So you can extend DeBrincat. Okay, you can extend DeBrincat. What would you say is like the bare minimum in terms of years for Chicago to be competitive? Like, in how many years would I have to say the Chicago Blackhawks will be in the playoffs for you to not be surprised?
It's a good question.
Like, I think if I said 3 years, like in 3 to 4, you'd be like, I don't even think that's possible. That's a stretch.
Yeah.
Like 4 to 5 years, anything can happen. Who knows where teams are going to be, but.
Yeah, I don't think it would have been a quick turnaround for that team at all. I think it probably would have been at least 3 years.
There you go. So that's almost half it. That's almost half his deal.
Yeah.
So half the deal is wasted. And because you have him, he's not putting you at the bottom because he's putting up 40 goals. So
yeah, no, it's a good way to look at it. It really is. I just think that Chicago still had enough pieces where they could have retooled this, as opposed to completely tear down, scorched earth.
Yeah.
I feel like there was an avenue here where they could have just retooled this roster. Because another player who you mentioned, I didn't even mention in that original rant I went on, was Kirby Dach, who they also got rid of. They picked this guy 3rd overall.
He's like 21.
Yeah, he's still a very young guy. So you have Kirby Dach, early 20s, DeBrincat, 24 years old. Like, these are guys you should be building around. You still have Kane and Taves. Kane, who's still a very productive player. Taves has fallen off. But you still have pieces, right? Like, it was still like a decent roster. And then even Dylan Strome and Dominic Kubalik, not extending qualifying offers to those guys. They're free agents now. It's just it's a bizarre situation. They're clearly all in on Connor Bedard. And if they don't get Connor Bedard, they're going to be pretty rattled. And they're going to be in a rough spot. As are the other teams who are tanking for Connor Bedard.
It's going to be ugly next year at the bottom of the standings for Connor Bedard.
Yes.